The distant wail of a train whistle pierced the morning air as Wilhelmina Cooper stared at the empty space on her finger where her wedding band had once rested. 2 years a widow and the small town of Riversbend, Colorado still treated her as though she were draped in black crepe, a walking reminder of tragedy they'd rather forget. The year was 1878, and at 32, she had already been dismissed as too plain to warrant a second chance at marriage in a frontier town where women were scarce and valued primarily for their beauty or wealth. She possessed neither in abundance. Wilhelmina Willa, to the few who bothered to know her, tucked a wayward strand of chestnut hair behind her ear and continued unpacking supplies in the mercantile where she worked. The bell above the door jingled, announcing the arrival of Mrs. Hawthorne and her daughter Rose, the town's reigning beauty. "Good morning, Mrs. Cooper," Mrs. Hawthorne said with the particular blend of pity and condescension reserved for those considered unfortunate. "We're looking for ribbon for Rose's new dress. She's to meet the Wilkinson boys' family this Sunday." Rose giggled behind her hand, blue eyes sparkling. At 19, she'd already turned down 3 proposals. "Mother says I might actually accept this one. His father owns half the cattle in the county." "The blue silk ribbon just came in yesterday," Willa said, forcing brightness into her voice. "I'll fetch it for you." As she moved to the back room, she heard Mrs. Hawthorne's stage whisper, "Poor thing." Thomas Cooper was no great catch, but at least she had someone. No one's likely to look twice at such a plain woman now. Willa's hands trembled as she reached for the ribbon box. She had loved Thomas, despite his drinking and occasional meanness. When pneumonia took him after a winter night spent unconscious in the snow outside the saloon, she had mourned genuinely. But 2 years had passed, and loneliness had become her constant companion. The afternoons stretched endlessly as Willa tended the store. When Mr. Bentley, the owner, returned from his lunch, she asked if she might leave early. "Got an admirer waiting, Mrs. Cooper?" He chuckled at his own joke. "Go on then, not much business today anyhow." Willa gathered her shawl and stepped into the October chill. The main street of Riversbend bustled with the usual activity: freight wagons unloading at the depot, cowboys lounging outside the saloon, ladies hurrying to finish errands before supper time. No one nodded to her as she passed. In the 2 years since Thomas's death, she had become nearly invisible. As she approached the bridge that gave the town its name, the sound of hammering caught her attention. A man she didn't recognize was repairing the weathered railings. Tall and broad-shouldered, his sleeves rolled up despite the cool air, he worked with practiced efficiency. When he straightened and turned, she caught her breath at the intensity of his gaze. "Afternoon, madam," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was deep with a hint of southern drawl. "Good afternoon," she replied, hurrying past, unaccustomed to being noticed. "Careful there," he called. "Some boards are still loose." Willa slowed her pace, picking her way across the bridge carefully. When she reached the other side, she glanced back. The stranger was still watching her, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Feeling her cheeks flush, she turned and continued home. Her small house sat at the edge of town, a modest structure Thomas had built when they first married. The garden she had once tended was overgrown now she hadn't the heart to plant flowers after he died. Inside was neat but spare, containing little that spoke of joy or comfort. Willa lit the stove and prepared a simple meal, eating alone at the kitchen table as she had every night for 2 years. Through the window, she watched the sunset paint the distant mountains gold, then crimson, then deep purple. When darkness fell, she lit a lamp and took out her mending. The next morning, she walked back to town with a curious lightness in her step. The bridge repair continued, and the same man was there, driving nails with powerful strokes. "Morning, madam," he called out as she approached. "Good morning." She slowed her pace, curiosity overcoming shyness. "Are you new to Riversbend?" He straightened, wiping his brow with a bandana. Up close, she could see he was perhaps 40, with deep lines around his eyes that suggested they smiled often, though his expression remained serious. His hair was dark brown with threads of silver at the temples, and a neat mustache framed his mouth. "Arrived last week. Name's Daniel Garrick, just signed on as foreman at the Lazy S Ranch." Wilhelmina Cooper, she replied. I work at Bentley's Mercantile. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Cooper. His eyes, a warm hazel, held hers a moment longer than necessary. Bridge should be fixed by tomorrow. Been a hazard too long from what I hear. Yes, it has, she agreed, surprised that he'd bothered to ask around about such things. Most new arrivals in Riverspend headed straight for the saloon or the land office. Well, I should get to work. Hope to see you again, Mrs. Cooper, he said, and the simple words warmed her more than they should have. At the Mercantile, Mrs. Bentley was gossiping with Mrs. Palmer, both of them bent close over the counter. They say he was some kind of hero in the war, Mrs. Palmer was saying. Fought for the Union, lost his wife to fever afterward. A widower, Mrs. Bentley sighed dramatically. And so handsome. Every unmarried woman in town will be setting her cap for him. And some married ones too, I shouldn't wonder, Mrs. Palmer laughed. They fell silent as Willa entered, exchanging meaningful glances. Good morning, Mrs. Cooper, Mrs. Bentley said. I was just telling Margaret about the new foreman at the Lazy S. I met him on my way here, Willa said, removing her shawl. He's repairing the bridge. You met Daniel Garrick. Mrs. Palmer's eyebrows shot up in surprise. What did you think of him? Willa busied herself arranging a display of canned goods. He seems capable. The women exchanged another look, this one tinged with amusement. Willa knew what they were thinking. What would a man like Daniel Garrick see in the plain widow Cooper? The thought stung, but she was accustomed to such dismissals. The day passed slowly. When Willa left the store that evening, she took a different route home, avoiding the bridge. She told herself it was because the repair work might make crossing difficult, but in her heart, she knew it was fear not of Daniel Garrick, but of the unfamiliar feelings his notice had stirred in her. Sunday came, and Willa sat in her usual pew at church, alone near the back. Pastor Mills delivered a sermon on the prodigal son, but Willa found her attention wandering. She hadn't seen Daniel Garrick since that brief encounter on the bridge, and she wondered if he attended services. As if in answer to her unspoken question, the door at the back of the church opened and he slipped in, taking a seat in the very last row. He was dressed in a clean white shirt and dark vest, his usually unruly hair combed neatly. As the congregation stood to sing the final hymn, his deep baritone carried from the back, strong and true. When the service ended, Willa remained seated, allowing others to file out ahead of her. Outside, people gathered in small groups, enjoying the mild weather and Sunday socializing. Willa stood apart as always, preparing to walk home alone. She was startled when a shadow fell across her path. Mrs. Cooper, Daniel Garrick said, tipping his hat. I hoped I might see you here. Mr. Garrick, she acknowledged, acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople nearby. How are you finding Riverspend? It's a fine town, though some parts need attention. His eyes crinkled at the corners. The bridge is solid now, at least. Thank you for that. It's been worrisome for some time. He seemed about to say more when Rose Hawthorne approached, her mother trailing behind. You must be Mr. Garrick, Rose said, extending a gloved hand with practiced grace. I'm Rose Hawthorne. Everyone's talking about the new foreman at the Lazy S. Daniel took her hand briefly. Miss Hawthorne. We're having a small gathering at our home next Saturday evening, Mrs. Hawthorne interjected. Nothing formal, just a few friends. We'd be honored if you'd attend. That's kind of you, madam, he said, his expression polite but reserved. Oh, you simply must come, Rose insisted, touching his arm. It's so dull here sometimes. A new face is most welcome, especially one with stories to tell. They say you were in the war. I was, he confirmed, his voice flat. He glanced at Willa, who stood awkwardly to the side. Will you be attending, Mrs. Cooper? Before Willa could respond, Mrs. Hawthorne laughed lightly. Oh, Mrs. Cooper doesn't attend social gatherings, not since her husband passed. The words were accompanied by a sympathetic look that didn't reach her eyes. Daniel's gaze returned to Willa, questioning. She forced a smile. It's true, I don't get out much these days. Well, perhaps it's time you did, he said. Then, turning to Mrs. Hawthorne, I'd be pleased to attend your gathering, madam, provided Mrs. Cooper receives an invitation as well. A flicker of displeasure crossed Mrs. Hawthorne's face before her social mask slipped back into place. Of course, Mrs. Cooper is always welcome. Rose looked bewildered, her perfect features clouded with confusion. But mother, you said, Rose, dear, Mrs. Hawthorne cut her off. We should greet the Wilkinsons, they're waiting. She turned a tight smile to Daniel and Willa. Saturday at 7 then, good day. As they walked away, Willa stared at Daniel in disbelief. You didn't have to do that. Do what? Force them to invite me. It's not necessary. His expression turned serious. I didn't force anything. If they don't want my company without yours, I'm happy to decline. But why? You don't know me. I'd like to, he said simply. If you'll permit it. Willa felt heat rise to her cheeks. Mr. Garrick, Daniel, please, Daniel. His name felt foreign on her tongue. I'm afraid I wouldn't be welcome at the Hawthorns, not really. Then perhaps you'd allow me to escort you somewhere else. The hotel serves a decent Sunday dinner. Willa hesitated. It had been so long since anyone had sought her company, let alone a man like Daniel Garrick. Every instinct warned her to decline, to retreat to the safety of her solitude, but something in his steady gaze gave her courage. I would like that, she said finally. Thank you. They walked side by side down the main street, ignoring the curious stares of townspeople. The hotel dining room was nearly full, but the host found them a small table near the window. Daniel held her chair with a courtesy that transported Willa to another time before grief and loneliness had become her constant companions. Tell me about yourself, Mrs. Cooper, he said once they were seated. Willa, please, she replied. There's not much to tell. I was born in Pennsylvania. My family came west when I was 16. They died of cholera near Fort Laramie. I continued on with the wagon train and ended up here. Married Thomas Cooper when I was 23. He died 2 years ago. I'm sorry about your family and your husband. Thank you. She studied her hands, embarrassed by the starkness of her life story. What about you? Daniel's eyes took on a distant look. Born in Virginia, fought for the Union, which didn't please my family much. Married my childhood sweetheart, Elizabeth, after the war. We had a son. He paused. Lost them both to fever in 71. I'm so sorry, Willa said softly, understanding now the shadows behind his smile. It was a long time ago. He straightened, as if physically setting aside the memory. I've been moving around since then, working ranches mostly, never stayed anywhere too long. Until now, maybe. His eyes met hers. Depends on what I find here worth staying for. The meal passed pleasantly, their conversation moving to lighter topics. Daniel told stories of his travels, of cattle drives and frontier towns, of the characters he'd met along the way. Willa found herself laughing for what felt like the first time in years. When they finished, Daniel insisted on walking her home. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as they crossed the newly repaired bridge. Solid work, Willa commented, testing a railing with her hand. I believe in doing things right the first time, he replied. Saves trouble later. At her gate, she turned to thank him. I enjoyed today very much. As did I, he hesitated. About the Hawthorns gathering, you don't need to escort me, she said quickly. I understand if you'd rather go alone. That's not what I was going to say. His expression was earnest. I meant it when I said I'd only go if you were invited, but I won't hold you to attending if you'd rather not. Willa considered this. The thought of entering the Hawthorns' grand home, facing the barely concealed surprise, or worse, pity of Riverspen's social elite, made her stomach tighten. But the alternative, knowing Daniel would be there, perhaps captured by Rose's beauty and charm, was somehow more distressing. I'll go, she said, surprising herself. If you're sure you want my company, I'm sure. His smile warmed his entire face. I'll call for you at 6:30 on Saturday. As she watched him walk away, Willa felt a flutter of something long dormant in her chest. It wasn't quite hope, she knew better than to hope, but it was something akin to it. A sense of possibility she hadn't felt since before Thomas's death. Inside her small house, she moved through her evening routine with unusual awareness of her surroundings. The quiet that had once been a comfort now seemed oppressive. The emptiness of the rooms echoed with newfound loneliness. For the first time in 2 years, Willa allowed herself to wonder if there might be more to her life than memories and solitude. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Willa saw Daniel only once, when he came into the mercantile to purchase supplies for the ranch. Their conversation was brief but warm, ending with his confirmation that he would see her Saturday evening. On Saturday, Willa stood before her small mirror, critically assessing her appearance. Her best dress, a navy blue wool with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs, was several years old and slightly faded. Her hair, pulled back in its usual simple knot, did nothing to enhance her unremarkable features. For a moment, she considered sending word to Daniel that she had fallen ill, sparing them both the inevitable comparisons when they arrived at the Hawthorns. But a promise was a promise. At precisely 6:30, a knock sounded at her door. Taking a deep breath, Willa opened it to find Daniel on her porch, hat in hand, dressed in what was clearly his finest suit. "You look lovely," he said, his eyes warm with appreciation. "Thank you," she replied, disbelieving but touched by the compliment. "You're very handsome yourself." He offered his arm, and they set off toward the Hawthorns' home on the hill overlooking town. The evening air was crisp, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I should warn you," Willa said hesitantly, "the Hawthorns are, well, they're the social center of Riverspend. Mrs. Hawthorne can be rather particular about who she welcomes into her circle." "Are you telling me I might not meet her standards?" Daniel's tone was light, teasing. "No, of course not. You're exactly the sort of person she likes to have at her gatherings. New, interesting, with connections to the Lazy S." Willa paused. "I'm the one who doesn't belong." Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her. "Willa, you don't have to do this if it makes you uncomfortable. We could turn around right now, go back to the hotel for dinner instead." The genuine concern in his voice nearly undid her. "It's not that. I want you to understand what you're walking into. Once we're there, people will wonder why you're with me. They'll try to separate us, introduce you to more suitable companions." "More suitable," his brow furrowed. "What does that mean? Younger, prettier?" She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I've heard the whispers, Daniel. Too plain, they say. What a shame. As if my husband's death wasn't tragedy enough, they pity me for having no prospects of another marriage." Daniel's expression darkened. "People can be cruel when they lack understanding." "It's not cruelty, exactly, just dismissal." Willa smoothed her skirt nervously. "I don't want their pity to extend to you for choosing my company." "Willa," he took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "I don't give a damn what anyone in this town thinks about who I spend time with. Plain to them, precious to me." The words hung in the air between them, startling in their directness. Willa felt heat rise to her cheeks, uncertain how to respond to such a declaration. "You barely know me," she finally managed. "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you have kind eyes that light up when you laugh. I know you've faced loss and kept going. I know you're the first person in this town who spoke to me as a man, not as some curiosity or prize to be claimed." Willa blinked back unexpected tears. "Daniel, we don't have to go to this gathering," he continued. "But if we do, I want you to know that I'll be proud to walk in with you on my arm, and I won't let anyone make you feel less than what you are." In that moment, something shifted in Willa's heart, a loosening of the protective shell she had built around herself since Thomas's death. She squeezed Daniel's hands gently. "Let's go," she said. "Together." The Hawthorne residence blazed with light, every window aglow with the warm radiance of oil lamps. Music and laughter spilled from the open front door as they approached. A servant took their coats, and Mrs. Hawthorne herself greeted them in the foyer, her surprise at seeing Willa barely concealed beneath a veneer of hospitality. "Mr. Garrick, Mrs. Cooper, how lovely that you could join us." Her gaze lingered on their clasped hands before she recovered herself. "Please come in. Refreshments are in the dining room, and most of our guests are gathered in the parlor." They followed her through the impressive house, past expensive furnishings that spoke of wealth rare in a frontier town. In the parlor, conversation faltered as they entered, curious eyes taking in the unexpected pair. Rose Hawthorne detached herself from a group of admirers and floated toward them, resplendent in a pale pink gown that emphasized her delicate coloring. "Mr. Garrick, I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." Her smile dimmed slightly as she acknowledged Willa. Mrs. Cooper, what a surprise. It's been ages since we've seen you at a social gathering. Mr. Garrick was kind enough to escort me, Willa replied, fighting the urge to shrink back from the attention. How gallant, Rose said, slipping her arm through Daniel's free one. Now you simply must meet everyone. Mother has invited all the best families in Riverspend. Before Daniel could protest, Rose was drawing him away, leaving Willa standing alone. She watched as he was introduced to a succession of prominent citizens, his tall figure easily visible across the crowded room. To his credit, he repeatedly glanced back at her, his expression apologetic. Willa moved to the edge of the room, finding a quiet corner where she could observe without being noticed. It was a familiar position, the invisible widow, present but not participating. She had almost resigned herself to spending the evening this way when a voice spoke beside her. "They're a determined bunch, aren't they?" She turned to find an older gentleman regarding her with kind eyes. Silver-haired and distinguished, he leaned on a cane, watching the social maneuvering with evident amusement. "I'm afraid I don't know you, sir," Willa said. "Joseph Sullivan," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "Owner of the Lazy S Ranch, and you must be Mrs. Cooper. You know who I am. Daniel mentioned you." His eyes twinkled. Quite frequently, in fact, Willa felt her cheeks warm. "Oh, we only just met recently." "Sometimes that's all it takes." Mr. Sullivan nodded toward where Daniel stood, now surrounded by several of the town's most eligible young women. "He's not enjoying himself, you know, never cared much for these sorts of affairs." "Then why did he come?" "I suspect the answer is standing right beside me," Mr. Sullivan smiled. "Daniel's a good man, Mrs. Cooper, the best foreman I've had in 20 years, but he's restless, been moving from ranch to ranch since he lost his family. First time I've seen him show interest in putting down roots." Before Willa could respond, Daniel extricated himself from his admirers and made his way across the room to them. "Mr. Sullivan," he greeted his employer, "I see you've met Mrs. Cooper. Indeed I have." The older man's eyes moved between them. "Fine woman, from what I can tell." "You two enjoy the evening. I need to speak with Hawthorne about that water rights business." As he moved away, Daniel turned to Willa with a rueful expression. "I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have let Rose drag me away." "It's all right. I understand how these things work." "Well, I don't like it." He offered his arm. "Would you care to step outside for some air? It's getting rather stuffy in here." Grateful for the escape, Willa placed her hand on his arm, aware of the curious glances that followed them as they made their way to the veranda. The night air was cool and refreshing after the warm, perfumed atmosphere inside. "Better?" Daniel asked, leaning against the railing. "Much." Willa gazed up at the star-filled sky. "It's beautiful tonight." "Yes, it is." But he wasn't looking at the stars. His eyes were fixed on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Daniel," she began hesitantly, "I think perhaps we should talk about what you said earlier, about you being precious to me." His directness was both alarming and exhilarating. "I meant it." "But why?" "I'm nothing special. I'm not beautiful like Rose or accomplished or stop." He stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't do that. Don't measure yourself against what others value. I see you, Willa, not as they see you, but as you are." "And what am I?" she whispered. "Strong, kind." "Genuine?" His hand came up to touch her cheek lightly. "And yes, beautiful to me, the way your eyes change color in different light, the grace in how you move, the quiet dignity you carry despite everything." Willa closed her eyes, overwhelmed by emotions she had thought long buried. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just consider the possibility that what they think doesn't matter, that maybe, just maybe, there's someone who sees beyond their narrow judgment." From inside came the sound of laughter and music. Someone had begun playing the piano and voices joined in a popular song. The party continued without them, a world away from the quiet intimacy of the veranda. "Should we go back inside?" Willa asked, though it was the last thing she wanted. "Do you want to?" She shook her head. "Then let's not." Daniel smiled. "In fact, if you're willing, I'd like to take you somewhere else, somewhere we can talk without an audience." "Where? Just trust me." They slipped away from the Hawthorne residence unnoticed in the revelry. Daniel led her through town to the livery stable, where he spoke briefly to the night attendant before returning with 2 saddled horses. "Can you ride?" he asked. "It's been years," Willa admitted. "But yes." He helped her mount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The touch lingered even after she was settled in the saddle. They rode out of town at a gentle pace, following the river that gave Riverspend its name. The moon had risen, casting silver light across the landscape. After about a mile, Daniel turned off the main trail onto a narrower path that climbed gradually. Willa followed, curious but trusting. They emerged onto a small plateau overlooking the valley. Below them, Riverspend's lights twinkled like fallen stars, the town peaceful in the distance. "I found this place my first week here," Daniel said as they dismounted. "Come up here a few times to think." "It's lovely," Willa breathed, taking in the panoramic view. They sat on a flat rock, comfortable in the shared silence. After a while, Daniel spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "When I lost Elizabeth and our son, I thought that was the end of my story. The part where happiness stopped and just existing began." He looked at her. "Is that how it felt for you? With Thomas?" Willa considered the question carefully. "Yes and no. Thomas and I, it wasn't a perfect marriage. He drank too much. Sometimes he was unkind, but we had good moments too. When he died, I mourned him, but I also mourned the life I thought I would have, the children we never had, the companionship even when it was flawed. And now I've grown accustomed to being alone. It's safer in a way, no disappointments, no one to fail or be failed by." She met his gaze. "Until you spoke to me on that bridge, I'd resigned myself to it. And now," he repeated softly, "now I'm afraid," she admitted, "afraid to hope for something more. Afraid it will disappear just when I start to believe in it." Daniel took her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "I understand fear, Willa. I've lived with it too. Fear that if I care about someone, I'll lose them. Fear that I don't deserve another chance. And yet here you are." "Here I am," he agreed, "taking a risk because some things are worth the fear." The honesty in his words touched her deeply. There was no artifice in Daniel Garrick, no pretense or calculation, just a man who had suffered loss and found the courage to reach out again. "I don't know what this is between us," Willa said. "It's happened so quickly. Sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I'm not asking for promises, Willa, just a chance to see where this might lead." She looked out over the valley at the town that had both sheltered and isolated her for years. From this distance, it seemed smaller, less intimidating. The opinions that had shaped her days, the whispers, the pitying glances felt suddenly insignificant compared to the connection forming between her and this man. "I'd like that," she said finally, turning back to him. "A chance." His smile was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. They sat together under the stars, talking of small things and large ones, learning the contours of each other's lives. When the night air grew too cold, they reluctantly mounted their horses and rode back to town. At her door, Daniel helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist. "Thank you for tonight." "I should be thanking you," Willa replied. "It was the most enjoyable evening I've had in longer than I can remember. May I call on you tomorrow? Perhaps we could attend church together." The thought of walking into church beside Daniel, of facing the town's scrutiny openly, sent a flutter of anxiety through her. But there was determination there too, and something else, a spark of defiance she hadn't felt in years. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Until tomorrow, then." Willa watched him ride away, the moonlight silvering his figure until he disappeared around a bend. Inside her small house, she moved through the familiar rooms with a strange sense of newness, as if seeing them through different eyes. The loneliness that had permeated these walls for so long seemed less oppressive somehow, tempered by possibility. Sleep came slowly that night, her mind full of conversations and glances, of the feeling of Daniel's hand holding hers. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were of open skies and new beginnings. Morning brought clear sunshine and the knowledge that today, for the first time in years, someone was looking forward to seeing her. Willa dressed with unusual care, choosing her second-best dress, a dark green that brought out the amber flecks in her hazel eyes. She arranged her hair more elaborately than usual, securing it with her mother's silver combs. Daniel arrived promptly, freshly shaven and smiling. "You look beautiful," he said, the simple compliment warming her more than the autumn sun. They walked to church together, his arm supporting hers. Willa was acutely aware of the stares, the whispers behind hands as they entered the building, but Daniel's steady presence beside her gave her courage. They sat near the front, a statement in itself. Pastor Mill's sermon was on redemption and second chances, words that seemed meant specifically for them. When the service ended, Daniel kept her hand tucked in his arm as they moved outside to the churchyard. Mrs. Hawthorne intercepted them almost immediately, her social smile firmly in place. "Mr. Garrick, Mrs. Cooper, we missed you at the gathering last night. You disappeared so suddenly." "My apologies, Mrs. Hawthorne," Daniel replied smoothly. "I wanted to show Mrs. Cooper the view from Sentinel Ridge. The moonlight was too perfect to resist." Mrs. Hawthorne's eyebrows rose. "Indeed, how romantic!" The word hung in the air, laden with implications. Willa felt her cheeks warm but kept her head high. "It was," Daniel agreed, unperturbed. "One of the most pleasant evenings I've spent in a long while." Rose appeared at her mother's side, her pretty face composed but her eyes sharp with curiosity. "We had hoped you might stay longer, Mr. Garrick. Several people were looking forward to meeting you." "Another time, perhaps," he said politely. "Mrs. Cooper and I have plans for today as well." "If you'll excuse us." Without waiting for a response, he guided Willa away, leaving the Hawthorns staring after them. Once they were out of earshot, Willa let out a breathless laugh. "You didn't tell me we had plans today." "We do now," he grinned. "I thought we might have a picnic if you're amenable. The weather's fine, and I know a lovely spot by the river." "A picnic sounds wonderful, but I haven't prepared anything." "I took the liberty of arranging it." Daniel looked almost boyish in his enthusiasm. "Mrs. Jenkins at the hotel packed a basket for us. It's waiting at the livery with the horses." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. "You think of everything?" "I try." His expression grew more serious. "Willa, I want you to know that I understand what it means for you to be seen with me like this, the talk it will cause. If it's too much, too soon, it's not," she interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. "I've spent 2 years caring what this town thinks of me. I'm tired of it." His smile returned, brighter than before. "Then let's give them something worth talking about." The picnic spot was perfect, a secluded bend in the river shaded by cottonwood trees, their leaves golden in the autumn light. Daniel spread a blanket on the grassy bank and unpacked the basket. Cold chicken, biscuits, apple tarts, and a bottle of cider. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily between them. As the afternoon lengthened, Willa found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone about her childhood in Pennsylvania, her parents' dreams of Western prosperity, the terrible journey after their deaths when she, barely 16, had continued on alone. "You were very brave," Daniel said, his admiration evident. "Not brave, just surviving." She plucked a blade of grass, twisting it between her fingers. "What about you? You mentioned Virginia, but not much else about your life before the war." A shadow crossed his face. "Not much to tell. My family owned a small tobacco plantation, not grand but comfortable. My father expected me to take it over someday. Then the war came." He paused. "When I chose the Union, he disowned me. Haven't been back since. I'm sorry, don't be. I made my choice knowing what it would cost." His eyes met hers. Some principles are worth the sacrifice. They fell silent, watching the river flow past, each contemplating the paths that had led them to this moment. After a while, Daniel spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "I've been thinking about staying in Riverspend. Permanently, I mean." Willa's heart quickened. "You have. Mr. Sullivan has offered me a partnership in the Lazy S. He's getting older, has no sons to take over. Says he needs someone he trusts to help run things." Daniel picked up a small stone, turning it over in his palm. "I've never stayed anywhere more than a year or two since Elizabeth died. Always moved on when memories started catching up with me. And now I'm thinking maybe it's time to stop running." He tossed the stone into the river, watching the ripples spread. Build something lasting. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Willa hardly dared breathe, afraid to shatter the moment. "What do you think?" he asked finally, turning to face her. "I think." She hesitated, gathering courage. "I think Riverspend would be fortunate to keep you. Just Riverspend." His eyes held hers, searching. "No," she whispered, "not just Riverspend." Daniel reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. "I know it's soon, too soon probably to speak of certain things. But I want you to know that whatever happens between us, my decision to stay isn't contingent on expectations." The consideration in his words moved her. How different he was from Thomas, who had proposed because she was available and willing, who had never truly seen her as she was. "Thank you for that," she said softly, "but I hope that I might be part of your reason to stay, even if it's not the only one." His smile was tender. "You already are, Willa, more than you know." The sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Reluctantly, they packed the remains of their picnic and mounted the horses for the ride back to town. Daniel insisted on seeing her to her door, though it meant an extra trip back to the livery afterward. "I have to go to Denver tomorrow," he told her as they stood on her porch. "Ranch business for Mr. Sullivan. I'll be gone about a week." "Oh," Willa couldn't hide her disappointment. "I understand. I'll write," he promised. "And I'd like to call on you as soon as I return, if I may. I'd like that very much." He hesitated, then leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "Until I return," he murmured. Willa watched him ride away, her cheek tingling where his lips had touched. A week suddenly seemed an eternity. True to his word, Daniel wrote every day he was in Denver. The letters arrived by stage, each one a testament to his growing feelings for her. He wrote of the business he conducted, of the city sights, but mostly of how each experience made him wish she were there to share it. Willa kept the letters in a small box beside her bed, reading them each night before sleep. In her replies, she found herself opening up more than she had with anyone, sharing thoughts and dreams long suppressed. The town noticed the correspondence, of course. Willa felt the speculative glances when she eagerly awaited the stage's arrival each afternoon. Mrs. Bentley made pointed comments about gentlemen callers and second chances at happiness. Even Mrs. Hawthorne stopped by the mercantile, ostensibly to purchase handkerchiefs, but really to fish for information. "Such a shame Mr. Garrick had to leave so suddenly," she remarked, examining lace with feigned interest. "Rose was hoping to become better acquainted with him." "I believe he'll return soon," Willa replied neutrally. "Mr. Sullivan's business in Denver shouldn't take more than a week." Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem very well informed about Mr. Garrick's plans." "He mentioned it before he left," Willa said, refusing to be intimidated. "I see." Mrs. Hawthorne selected a handkerchief and placed it on the counter. "You know, Mrs. Cooper, a man in Mr. Garrick's position will be looking to establish himself properly in Riverspend. A suitable wife would be part of that." The implication was clear, but instead of the familiar shame and inadequacy, Willa felt a surge of something like anger. "I imagine Mr. Garrick is quite capable of determining what's suitable for himself." Mrs. Hawthorne's lips thinned. "Of course, I only mention it because, well, it would be unfortunate if anyone were to be hurt by misunderstanding his intentions." "Thank you for your concern," Willa said, wrapping the purchase carefully. "Will there be anything else?" With a tight smile, Mrs. Hawthorne took her leave. Willa watched her go, wondering if there was any truth to her insinuations. Daniel had spoken of staying in Riverspend, of building something lasting. But had she read too much into his words? After all, they had known each other barely 2 weeks. These doubts plagued her for the remainder of Daniel's absence. By the time the week ended, she had convinced herself that his return would bring a polite withdrawal, a gentle explanation that their brief connection had been pleasant but not meant to last. So when he appeared at the mercantile the day after his return, hat in hand and smile as warm as ever, she was momentarily speechless. "Daniel," she finally managed, "you're back. Got in late last night." His eyes took in her face, his expression softening. I missed you, Willa. The simple declaration dissolved her fears. I missed you too. Mr. Bentley cleared his throat from behind the counter, reminding them they weren't alone. Mrs. Cooper, perhaps you'd like to take your break now. It's rather quiet today. Grateful for his understanding, Willa removed her apron. Thank you, Mr. Bentley. Outside, Daniel offered his arm and they walked toward the town square. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Willa opened it carefully to find a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a forget-me-not. It's beautiful, she breathed. It reminded me of your eyes, he said. The way they change from blue to gray depending on the light. She traced the intricate design with her fingertip. Thank you. I'll treasure it, may I? He asked, taking the brooch from her. At her nod, he pinned it carefully to her collar, his fingers brushing her neck. Perfect. They continued their walk, Daniel telling her about Denver, filling in details his letters hadn't covered. When they reached the square, they found it busy with preparations for the upcoming Harvest Festival. Will you attend the festival with me? Daniel asked. It's this Saturday, I believe. Yes, I'd like that. Willa hesitated. But Daniel, there's something I should tell you. While you were away, Mrs. Hawthorne came to the store. She implied that your interest in me might be misplaced. That a man in your position would be looking for someone more suitable. Daniel's expression darkened. Did she upset you? Not exactly. But it did make me wonder if perhaps there's some truth to what she said. We've known each other such a short time and you're establishing yourself here. Someone like Rose Hawthorne would be an advantageous match. Willa. He stopped walking, turning to face her. I'm not interested in advantageous matches or social climbing. I've spent 7 years wandering, trying to outrun grief. For the first time since I lost my family, I've found someone who makes me want to stay in one place, who makes me feel like I might have a future worth building. He took her hands in his. That someone is you, not Rose Hawthorne or anyone else. His sincerity was unmistakable. Willa felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have doubted. Don't apologize, I understand why you might question this. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. I know it's happened quickly between us, but some things you just know. When I saw you crossing that bridge, something inside me recognized you as if I'd been looking for you without realizing it. The words echoed her own feelings so perfectly that Willa could only nod, too moved to speak. I don't expect you to feel the same way yet, Daniel continued. I only ask that you give us a chance to see what this might become. I already know what I feel, Willa said softly. I was just afraid to trust it. His smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Then trust this instead. Gently, he drew her closer and lowered his head to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, a question asked and answered in the meeting of lips. Then, as she responded, it deepened into something more certain, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, Willa was aware of curious onlookers, of whispers and stares. For once, she didn't care. Let them talk. Let them wonder how plain Widow Cooper had captured the attention of Daniel Garrick. Their opinions mattered less with every passing day. I should get back to the store, she said reluctantly, and I need to report to Mr. Sullivan. Daniel seemed equally unwilling to end their time together. But I'll see you tomorrow, perhaps dinner at the hotel. I'd like that. He walked her back to the Mercantile, leaving her with another brief kiss that nevertheless left her flushed and breathless. Inside, Mr. Bentley raised an eyebrow but said nothing, his smile knowing. The days that followed took on a pattern. Daniel would call on Willa in the evenings after work, sometimes taking her to dinner at the hotel, other times simply walking with her through town or sitting on her porch, talking until the stars emerged. Each day deepened their connection, revealed new facets of compatibility and understanding. The town watched their courtship with varying reactions. Some, like Mr. Bentley, seemed genuinely pleased for Willa. Others, like Mrs. Hawthorne and her social circle, maintained a polite but cool distance, clearly disapproving. Rose herself avoided Willa entirely, turning away whenever they encountered each other. On the day of the Harvest Festival, Willa woke to a sense of anticipation. The event was Riverspend's largest social gathering of the year, with people coming from outlying ranches and neighboring settlements to join the celebration. It would be her first time attending since Thomas's death, and her first public appearance with Daniel that couldn't be dismissed as a casual encounter. She dressed with care in her newest dress, a russet brown that complemented her chestnut hair. The silver forget-me-not brooch added a touch of elegance to the simple garment. When Daniel arrived to escort her, his appreciative gaze confirmed she had chosen well. "You are a vision," he said, lifting her hand to his lips. The town square had been transformed with harvest decorations, cornstalks, pumpkins, and autumn flowers adorned every available space. Tables laden with food lined one side, while a space had been cleared for dancing. A small band played lively tunes, and children darted between groups of adults, their excitement palpable. As they moved through the crowd, Willa was conscious of the attention they attracted. Daniel seemed oblivious, his focus entirely on her comfort and enjoyment. He filled a plate for her from the buffet, found them seats at a table with Mr. Sullivan and some of the ranch hands, and kept up a steady stream of conversation that put her at ease. After they had eaten, the band struck up a waltz. Daniel stood and offered his hand. "Would you do me the honor?" Dancing was another activity Willa had abandoned after Thomas's death. For a moment, uncertainty gripped her. "It's been a long time," she admitted. "I'm not sure I remember how." "I'll remind you," he promised. "It's like riding a horse the body remembers." She allowed him to lead her to the dance floor, aware of curious eyes following their progress. Daniel's hand settled at her waist, strong and reassuring, as he guided her into the steps of the waltz. After a few uncertain moments, the rhythm came back to her, and they moved together with increasing confidence. "See, you're a natural," Daniel murmured, his eyes warm with admiration. As they circled the dance floor, Willa caught glimpses of familiar faces, Mrs. Bentley smiling approvingly, Pastor Mills nodding as they passed, Mrs. Hawthorne watching with thinly veiled disapproval. None of it mattered. In Daniel's arms, moving to the music, she felt truly alive for the first time in years. When the waltz ended, they stayed for another dance and another after that. During a break in the music, Daniel excused himself to get them refreshments. Willa found a seat at the edge of the dance floor, still flushed from their exertions. Mrs. Cooper. She looked up to find Rose Hawthorne standing before her, lovely in a cream-colored dress that emphasized her fair beauty. "Miss Hawthorne," Willa acknowledged, bracing herself for whatever was to come. Rose glanced around, ensuring they wouldn't be overheard. "I want to speak to you about Mr. Garrick." "What about him?" "I think you should know that my father and Mr. Sullivan have discussed a possible match between Mr. Garrick and myself." Rose's delicate features arranged themselves into an expression of concern. "It would be advantageous for everyone. The Lazy S needs connections to secure its future, and my father's influence in the territory is considerable." Willa felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'd hate to see you hurt when Mr. Garrick eventually realizes where his best interests lie." Rose's voice was gentle, as if she were doing Willa a kindness. "Men sometimes get distracted by novelty, but in the end they make practical choices." Before Willa could respond, Daniel returned, 2 cups of cider in hand. He nodded politely to Rose. "Miss Hawthorne, Mr. Garrick." Rose's smile was dazzling. "I was just telling Mrs. Cooper how lovely it is to see her enjoying the festival. It's been so long since she participated in town events." "Yes, it has," Daniel agreed, his expression neutral. "If you'll excuse us, I believe they're starting another dance." As they moved away, Willa remained silent, Rose's words echoing in her mind. Daniel seemed to sense her distress. "What did she say to you?" he asked quietly. "Nothing important." Willa forced a smile, "Just pleasantries," but the joy had gone out of the evening for her. Despite Daniel's attentiveness, she found herself watching for signs that Rose's claims might be true. Had Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Hawthorne discussed such an arrangement? Would Daniel eventually be swayed by practical considerations? When the festival ended and Daniel walked her home, he noticed her subdued mood. "Something's troubling you," he said as they reached her porch. "Has been since you spoke with Rose." Willa hesitated, reluctant to reveal her insecurities. but honesty had been the foundation of their relationship from the beginning. She said that her father and Mr. Sullivan have discussed a match between you and her, that it would be advantageous for the ranch. Daniel's expression hardened. Did she now? Is it true? Mr. Hawthorne has certainly hinted at such things, and Mr. Sullivan, well-meaning as he is, might have considered the business advantages. Daniel took her hands in his. But neither of them gets to decide my future or my heart. But if it would help secure your position at the ranch, Willa, he cut her off gently. I didn't choose to stay in Riverspend for business advantages. I chose to stay because of you, because for the first time in 7 years, I've found someone who makes me want to build a life again. The simple declaration melted her doubts. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have let her words affect me. Don't apologize. Daniel's thumb traced her cheek. I understand why they did, but I need you to know this. What I feel for you isn't a distraction or a passing fancy. It's the most real thing I've felt since I lost my family. Tears pricked Willa's eyes at the depth of emotion in his voice. I feel the same, she whispered. His kiss was tender, a reaffirmation of everything words couldn't fully express. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were serious. There's something I want to ask you, but not tonight, not when doubt has crept in. When I ask, I want you to be certain of my intentions. Willa's heart quickened at the implication. When? Soon, he smiled, pressing another kiss to her forehead. Very soon. That night, Willa lay awake, replaying the events of the day. Despite Rose's attempt to sow doubt, she found her faith in Daniel's feelings stronger than before. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future with him, a home filled with warmth and laughter, perhaps even children. The possibility both thrilled and terrified her. The following week brought an unexpected visitor to Riverspend. Willa was arranging a display of fabrics when the mercantile door opened, admitting a well-dressed gentleman she didn't recognize. Tall and distinguished, with silver-streaked dark hair and patrician features, he surveyed the store with an air of detached interest. Good morning, sir, she greeted him. May I help you find something? I doubt it, he replied, his accent unmistakably southern. Unless you can direct me to Daniel Garrick. Something in his tone, a coldness at odds with his polite words, put Willa on alert. May I ask who's inquiring? The man's eyebrows rose slightly at her question. Edward Garrick, his father. Willa's surprise must have shown on her face, for he continued. I see my son hasn't mentioned me, not surprising given our differences. Mr. Garrick is likely at the Lazy S Ranch, she said carefully. It's about 5 miles north of town. And you are. His assessing gaze was uncomfortably direct. Wilhelmina Cooper. Ah, recognition flickered in his eyes. The widow my son has been courting. News travels even to Virginia. Willa straightened, refusing to be intimidated. Yes, I am. Edward Garrick studied her with undisguised curiosity. Interesting, not what I expected. Before Willa could respond, Mr. Bentley emerged from the back room. Mrs. Cooper, the new shipment of, he broke off, noticing their visitor. Can I help you, sir? No need. Mrs. Cooper has provided the information I required. With a curt nod, Edward Garrick turned and left the store. Who was that? Mr. Bentley asked, watching through the window as the stranger mounted an expensive-looking horse. Daniel's father, Willa replied, a sense of foreboding settling over her. I don't think they're on good terms. Looks like the type who's used to getting his way, Mr. Bentley observed. Wonder what brings him all the way from Virginia. Willa wondered the same thing, and the answer worried her. As soon as her shift ended, she hurried to the Lazy S, hoping to warn Daniel of his father's arrival. But she was too late. As she approached the ranch house, she saw 2 figures on the porch, Daniel and his father, their stances rigid with tension. She hesitated, uncertain whether to intrude on what was clearly a private confrontation. Before she could decide, Daniel noticed her. His expression changed immediately, the anger giving way to concern. Willa, he called, descending the porch steps to meet her. What are you doing here? Your father came to the mercantile looking for you, she explained. I wanted to warn you, but I see he found you already. Yes, he did. Daniel's jaw tightened. I'm sorry if he bothered you. He didn't, not really. She glanced past him to where Edward Garrick stood watching them. Should I go? I don't want to intrude. No, Daniel took her hand firmly in his. Stay, please. Together they approached the porch. Up close, the resemblance between father and son was more apparent, the same strong jawline, the same intensity of gaze, though Edward's eyes were a colder blue compared to Daniel's warm hazel. Father, this is Wilhelmina Cooper. Willa, my father, Edward Garrick. Edward inclined his head slightly. We've met. What brings you to Colorado? Willa asked, attempting politeness despite the obvious tension. Family matters, he replied. My son and I have unfinished business. Which could have remained unfinished, Daniel said, his voice tight. There was no need for you to come all this way. When I received word that you were finally settling somewhere, that you were considering a permanent arrangement with Joseph Sullivan, I thought it time we resolved our differences. Edward's gaze moved between them. I didn't realize there were other factors influencing your decision to stay. The implication was clear, and Willa felt Daniel's hand tighten around hers. Willa is not a factor, he said coldly. She's the woman I intend to marry. The declaration, made so boldly and unexpectedly, left Willa momentarily speechless. They had spoken of feelings, of building something together, but this was the first time Daniel had stated his intentions so explicitly. Edward Garrick's expression revealed nothing. I see, and does Mrs. Cooper share these intentions? She does, Willa said, finding her voice. Though this isn't quite how I imagined the subject would arise, a flicker of something amusement, perhaps, crossed Edward's face. Life rarely arranges itself according to our expectations, Mrs. Cooper. He turned back to his son. Regardless of your personal arrangements, we still need to discuss the matter that brought me here, which is, your mother is ill. The blunt statement seemed to catch Daniel off guard. The doctors say she may not have much time. She's asked for you. Willa felt Daniel's shock as if it were her own. How ill? He asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. Consumption. It's advanced. Edward's tone softened slightly. She wants to see you, Daniel, to make peace before the end. The news transformed the confrontation entirely. Willa could see the conflict in Daniel's face, the lingering anger at his father warring with concern for his mother. When did it start? He asked. Last winter. She's been declining steadily since spring. Edward sighed, suddenly looking older. I would not have come if it weren't her express wish. She was most insistent. Daniel released Willa's hand, moving to the porch railing. His back to them, he stared out at the ranch lands. I need to think, he said finally. Edward nodded. I'm staying at the hotel in town. Let me know your decision. With a formal nod to Willa, he descended the steps and mounted his horse. When he had gone, Willa approached Daniel cautiously. Are you all right? I don't know. He turned to her, his expression troubled. My mother and I were always close, even after I joined the Union. She never approved of my father disowning me, though she didn't openly defy him either. You should go to her, Willa said gently. Whatever has happened between you and your father, you'll regret it if you don't say goodbye to your mother. Daniel studied her face. You really think so? I know so. She thought of her own parents, taken so suddenly by cholera. I would give anything for one more conversation with my mother. One chance to say all the things I never said. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. What did I do to deserve you, Willa Cooper? I ask myself the same question about you every day, she murmured against his chest. They stood together in the fading afternoon light, each lost in thought. Finally, Daniel spoke again. If I go to Virginia, will you wait for me? Willa drew back to look at him. Of course I will. It might be weeks, months even, depending on. He couldn't finish the sentence. I understand. She touched his face gently. I'll be here when you return. His eyes searched hers. I meant what I said before, about intending to marry you. It wasn't just for my father's benefit. I know. She smiled, though tears threatened. And my answer would be yes, if you were actually asking. I am asking. He took her hands in his. Not how I planned it, not with pretty words or on bended knee, but with all my heart. Willa Cooper, will you marry me? Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. His kiss was both tender and desperate, a promise and a farewell combined. When they finally parted, both were breathless. I'll speak to my father tomorrow, Daniel said. Make arrangements to leave as soon as possible, but first, there's something I want to do. "What's that?" Introduce my fiancé to Mr. Sullivan properly. He smiled, some of the worry leaving his face. "He's going to be pleased. He's quite fond of you, you know." "Is he?" Willa was surprised. "He hardly knows me." "He knows what matters, that you've brought me back to life." Together they walked to the main house, where Joseph Sullivan welcomed them warmly. When Daniel explained the situation, both his engagement and his need to travel to Virginia, the older man was understanding. "Family comes first," he said firmly. "The ranch will be here when you return." He turned to Willa with a twinkle in his eye. "And I trust Mrs. Cooper will keep you from staying away too long." "Indeed she will," Daniel agreed, his arm around her waist. As they prepared to leave, Mr. Sullivan pulled Daniel aside for a private word. Willa couldn't hear what was said, but when Daniel rejoined her, he seemed both thoughtful and pleased. "What was that about?" she asked as they rode back toward town. "Mr. Sullivan has made me an interesting proposition," Daniel replied, "but it can wait until I return. Right now, we have more immediate concerns." Those concerns occupied the next few days as Daniel prepared for his journey. He arranged for a temporary replacement at the ranch, settled his affairs in town, and spent every available moment with Willa. They decided not to announce their engagement formally until his return, though Mr. Bentley guessed from Willa's happiness what had transpired. The morning of Daniel's departure arrived too quickly. At the train station, they stood slightly apart from the other travelers, reluctant to say goodbye. "I'll write every day," Daniel promised, holding her close. "So will I." Willa fought back tears. "Give your mother my regards." "I will," he hesitated. "Willa, if things go badly, if my mother's condition worsens quickly, I might be away longer than expected. There will be arrangements to make, estate matters to settle." "I understand." She touched the forget-me-not brooch pinned to her collar. "Just come back to me when you can." "Nothing could keep me away." He kissed her one last time as the train whistle blew. "I love you, Willa Cooper." "I love you too." She stood on the platform long after the train had disappeared from sight, the words echoing in her heart. They had never said them before, though the feeling had been there, growing stronger with each day. Now they would sustain her through the separation. Life in Riversbend continued in Daniel's absence. Willa worked at the mercantile, kept her small house, and waited eagerly for the mail train each day. Daniel's letters arrived regularly, detailing his journey east and then his reunion with his mother. Margaret Garrick was indeed gravely ill, he wrote, but her mind was clear and her spirit strong. She had welcomed her son with tears and open arms, asking forgiveness for not standing against his father's decision years before. She was eager to hear about Willa, pressing Daniel for details about the woman who had captured his heart. As for Edward Garrick, Daniel wrote that a wary truce existed between them. His father had not apologized for the past, but seemed willing to set it aside in deference to his wife's condition. The family plantation had suffered during the war and its aftermath, but was slowly recovering under Edward's management. Weeks passed, and autumn deepened into winter. Riversbend received its first snowfall in early December, transforming the town into a pristine wonderland. Willa found herself watching the white flakes with a sense of melancholy, wondering if Daniel was seeing the same snow in Virginia, or if he was surrounded by a different landscape entirely. News of their engagement had spread despite their intention to keep it private. Mrs. Bentley had overheard Mr. Sullivan discussing it with Mr. Bentley and had wasted no time sharing the information with her friends. Willa found herself the recipient of congratulations from some and barely concealed surprise from others. Mrs. Hawthorne made a point of visiting the mercantile shortly after the news became public. "I understand felicitations are in order," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes, "though it seems rather precipitous." "Thank you," Willa replied simply, refusing to be drawn into explaining or defending her engagement. "One does wonder if Mr. Garrick will return from Virginia with the same enthusiasm," Mrs. Hawthorne continued. "Family has a way of influencing one's perspective." The insinuation was clear, but instead of doubt, Willa felt only pity for the woman's narrow understanding of love. "I trust Daniel completely," she said. Now, was there something specific you needed today? The rebuff, gentle as it was, clearly surprised Mrs. Hawthorne. She purchased a spool of thread and left without further comment. As Christmas approached, Daniel's letters took on a more somber tone. His mother was failing rapidly, he wrote. The doctors doubted she would see the new year. He was torn between his obligation to stay with her until the end and his desperate desire to return to Willa. "Don't worry about me," she wrote back. "Be with your mother for as long as she needs you. I'll be waiting when you return, whether it's next month or next spring." The letter she received in response contained unexpected news. Daniel had spoken to his mother about Willa, about their plans to marry and build a life together in Colorado. Margaret Garrick, growing weaker by the day, had expressed a wish to meet her future daughter-in-law before she died. "I know it's asking a great deal," Daniel wrote. "The journey is long and difficult, especially in winter. I would understand completely if you feel unable to come, but if there's any way you could make the trip, it would mean everything to my mother and to me." Willa read the letter twice, her heart racing. The thought of traveling across the country in winter was daunting. She had never been east of the Mississippi, never navigated the complex rail connections that would be required. But the need in Daniel's words was palpable, and the opportunity to meet the woman who had raised him, to give her that final comfort, seemed a gift Willa could not refuse. The next day, she gave Mr. Bentley notice that she would need an extended leave of absence. He was immediately supportive. "Family comes first," he said, echoing Mr. Sullivan's words. "Your position will be waiting when you return." Preparations for the journey consumed the next few days. Willa packed her modest belongings, arranged for a neighbor to watch her house, and purchased a train ticket east. Mr. Sullivan insisted on providing funds for her travel expenses, brushing aside her protests. "Consider it an advance on Daniel's partnership," he said. "The man's been like a son to me these past months. That makes you family too." The day before her departure, Rose Hawthorne appeared at Willa's door, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Miss Hawthorne," Willa greeted her, surprised. "What can I do for you? May I come in?" Rose asked, her usual confidence notably absent. Willa hesitated, then stood aside. "Of course." Inside, Rose glanced around the small, neat house with curiosity. "I heard you're leaving tomorrow, going to Virginia." "Yes, that's right, to see Daniel." It wasn't a question. "To meet his mother, who is very ill," Willa clarified. "And yes, to see Daniel as well." Rose nodded, twisting her gloved hands together. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Cooper. What I said at the Harvest Festival about my father and Mr. Sullivan arranging a match between Daniel and me, it wasn't entirely truthful." Willa raised her eyebrows, waiting. "My father suggested it to Mr. Sullivan, who mentioned it to Daniel as a possibility, but Daniel made it clear he wasn't interested." Rose's cheeks flushed. "I knew that when I spoke to you. I thought perhaps if you believed it, you might step aside." "Why tell me this now?" "Because you're traveling across the country in winter to be with him, to meet his dying mother." Rose met her gaze directly. "That's not the action of someone who deserves to be manipulated by petty jealousy." The admission was surprising in its honesty. "Thank you for telling me," Willa said. "Though I never doubted Daniel's feelings." "No, I don't suppose you did," Rose smiled ruefully. "That's why he chose you, isn't it? Your certainty, your strength." She moved toward the door. "Safe travels, Mrs. Cooper. I hope Daniel's mother finds peace in meeting you." After she had gone, Willa sat for a long time, reflecting on the unexpected encounter. Rose's jealousy was understandable. She had likely never been refused anything she truly wanted. But her apology suggested a depth of character Willa hadn't previously recognized. The journey east was as challenging as Willa had anticipated. Winter storms delayed trains, connections were missed, and crowded cars made sleep difficult. But each mile brought her closer to Daniel, and that knowledge sustained her through the discomforts of travel. She sent telegrams when possible, informing him of her progress. His responses were brief but heartfelt. "Counting hours until your arrival, mother holding on. Love, Daniel." Virginia in January was colder than Willa had expected, a damp chill that seemed to penetrate to the bone. When she finally stepped off the train in Richmond, Exhausted and disoriented from 5 days of travel, she scanned the platform anxiously for a familiar face. Willa. She turned to see Daniel pushing through the crowd, his face alight with joy despite the evident strain of recent weeks. He reached her in 3 long strides, gathering her into his arms with a desperation that spoke volumes about the toll of their separation. "You're here," he murmured against her hair. "I can hardly believe it." "I'm here," she confirmed, holding him just as tightly. "How is your mother?" His expression sobered. "Holding on, I think she's been waiting for you." They collected her luggage and made their way to a waiting carriage. As they traveled through Richmond and then out into the countryside, Daniel held her hand as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. "My father is making an effort," he told her. "For Mother's sake, he's agreed to all her wishes, including having you stay with us at the house." "That's generous of him," Willa said, though privately she wondered at the reception she would receive. The Garrick plantation, when they arrived, was a revelation. Though clearly diminished from its pre-war grandeur, Oak Hill remained an impressive estate. The main house, a stately white columned structure, stood at the end of a long drive lined with ancient oak trees. "It's beautiful," Willa breathed as they approached. "It was more so once," Daniel said. "Before the war, parts of the house were burned, fields destroyed. Father's been rebuilding slowly." A tall, thin man, presumably a butler or manservant, greeted them at the door. "Mr. Daniel," he said with evident pleasure, "and this must be Mrs. Cooper." "Yes, Jackson. Is my mother awake?" "She is, sir. Been asking for you all morning." Daniel squeezed Willa's hand. "Ready to meet her, as ready as I'll ever be." They ascended a sweeping staircase to the second floor, where a long hallway led to what was evidently the master bedroom. Daniel knocked softly before entering. Margaret Garrick lay propped against pillows, her once beautiful face gaunt with illness but her eyes bright and alert. She stretched out thin hands as they entered. "Daniel, my dear boy." Her voice was weak but warm. "And you must be Wilhelmina." "Yes, Mrs. Garrick." Willa moved to the bedside, taking the offered hands in hers. "I'm so pleased to meet you, though I wish it were under happier circumstances." "Nonsense," Margaret smiled. "What could be happier than meeting the woman who has brought my son back to life? And please call me Margaret." The immediate warmth of her welcome eased Willa's anxiety. She sat beside the bed while Daniel took a chair on the opposite side, and they talked for nearly an hour before Margaret's strength began to wane. "You must be exhausted from your journey," she said to Willa. "Go rest. We'll have plenty of time to become better acquainted." In truth, they did not have plenty of time. Margaret rallied briefly after Willa's arrival, but within days, it was clear the end was approaching. She spent those days getting to know her future daughter-in-law, sharing stories of Daniel's childhood, and offering gentle advice about marriage and family. "He's like his father in some ways," she confided during one of their private conversations. "Stubborn, principled to a fault. But he has my heart, thank goodness. He feels deeply, loves completely." "I know," Willa said softly. "It's what drew me to him." Margaret studied her with knowing eyes. "You've known loss too. I can see it in you. That's good. You understand each other in ways others might not." Edward Garrick maintained a respectful distance during these days, appearing only briefly to check on his wife's condition. His manner toward Willa was correct but reserved, revealing little of his thoughts about her engagement to his son. It was Daniel who explained the source of the long estrangement. "After the war, when I brought Elizabeth home, Father expected us to stay to help rebuild Oak Hill, but I couldn't. Too many of our neighbors had sons who died fighting for the Confederacy. The resentment was palpable. So you left. We went west to start fresh. Father saw it as abandonment, especially after all the plantation had suffered during the war. We exchanged angry words, things neither of us truly meant." Daniel sighed. "By the time I was ready to make peace, Elizabeth and our son were gone, and I was too consumed by grief to reach out. And now we're trying, for Mother's sake, whether anything will come of it afterward." He shrugged. "I don't know." Margaret Garrick died peacefully on a cold February morning, with Daniel holding one hand and Willa the other. Her last words were for her son. "Be happy, my darling boy. Build the life you deserve." The funeral was held 2 days later, a small, dignified service attended by neighbors and what remained of the extended Garrick family. Throughout, Edward maintained a stoic facade, accepting condolences with quiet dignity. But that evening, alone in the study with Daniel and Willa, his composure finally cracked. 42 years, he said, staring into the fire. We were married 42 years. I know, Father, Daniel said quietly. She never stopped loving you, you know. Even when I forbade her to write to you after you left. Edward's voice was rough with emotion. She kept every letter you sent hidden in her sewing box, read them until the paper wore thin. Daniel's expression revealed his surprise. I didn't know. There's a great deal we haven't known about each other these past years. Edward turned to face them. Your mother extracted a promise from me before she died. She made me swear I would try to know you again, Daniel, and to know your Wilhelmina. The use of her full name startled Willa. Edward continued, addressing her directly. I confess I had reservations when I learned of your engagement, a widow from a frontier town with no family connections, not what I envisioned for my only son. Daniel tensed beside her, but Edward held up a hand. Let me finish. These past weeks, observing you with my wife, with Daniel, I've come to understand what he sees in you. Your kindness, your strength, your unwavering loyalty. He paused. Margaret was right about you, as she usually was about most things. Thank you, Mr. Garrick, Willa said, moved by the unexpected acknowledgement. Edward, please, he cleared his throat. We're to be family, after all. In the days that followed, as they sorted through Margaret's belongings and settled the immediate affairs of the estate, a tentative rapport developed between father and son. They would never be close, Willa thought. Too much history stood between them. But they had found a measure of peace, and that was no small thing. 2 weeks after the funeral, Daniel and Willa prepared to return to Colorado. The night before their departure, Edward called them to the study once more. I have something for you, he said, opening a small box on his desk. Inside lay a ring, a delicate gold band set with a single perfect diamond. This was my mother's and then Margaret's. She wanted you to have it for your bride, Daniel. Daniel lifted the ring carefully. I remember this. Mother wore it every day, until she became too ill, yes. Edward's expression softened with memory. She would be pleased to see it on Wilhelmina's hand. Daniel turned to Willa, his eyes questioning. May I? She nodded, too moved for words. He slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit as if made for her. Perfect, he murmured. There's something else, Edward said. From his desk drawer he withdrew an envelope. This is for you both, a wedding gift of sorts. Daniel opened it to find a bank draft for a substantial sum. Father, this is too much. It's what your mother would have wanted. Enough to build a proper home, perhaps start a family. Edward's gaze was steady. I know you won't leave Colorado, your life is there now, but perhaps this will help you build the future she wished for you. The gesture, so unexpected after years of estrangement, brought tears to Daniel's eyes. Thank you, he said simply. They left Virginia the next day, carrying with them Margaret's blessing and the beginnings of reconciliation with Edward. The journey west seemed faster somehow, brightened by shared conversation and plans for their future. Mr. Sullivan's offer, Daniel said as their train crossed the Mississippi. The one he made before I left. He wants to build a new house on the eastern section of the ranch property. Says the main house is too big for him alone now. He's offering us the land if we want it 20 acres with that view of the mountains you admired. For us to build our own home, Willa asked, surprised by the generosity. Yes, we'd be close enough to the ranch for me to manage things but have our own place. Daniel squeezed her hand. What do you think? I think it sounds perfect. They returned to Riversbend in early March to find the town emerging from winter's grip. Word of their arrival spread quickly, and by evening their closest friends had gathered at the hotel to welcome them home. Mr. Sullivan embraced them both, his delight at their return evident. The place hasn't been the same without you, he told Daniel, though Jim Harper's done a fair job as temporary foreman. Mr. and Mrs. Bentley were there too, the latter barely containing her curiosity about their time in Virginia. Even Pastor Mills stopped by briefly to offer his congratulations and discuss potential dates for the wedding. Most surprising was the appearance of Mrs. Hawthorne, who approached Willa with uncharacteristic humility. "Mrs. Cooper," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology for my behavior before you left. It was unworthy." "Thank you," Willa replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. "That means a great deal. Rose has spoken to me at length about her own misunderstanding with you. It seems we both misjudged you." Mrs. Hawthorne glanced at Daniel, who was deep in conversation with Mr. Sullivan. "He's a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Willa said simply. The wedding took place in late April when the wildflowers carpeted the meadows around Riverspend. They chose a simple ceremony in the small church, attended by friends who had become like family. Mr. Sullivan gave Willa away, his weathered face beaming with pride. Mrs. Bentley wept openly, while Mr. Bentley pretended not to notice his own moist eyes. Daniel waited at the altar, tall and handsome in his new suit, his eyes never leaving Willa as she walked toward him in a gown of ivory silk, a gift from Edward Garrick, who had sent his regrets but his warmest wishes. Their vows were traditional but spoken with deep conviction, each word a promise built on the understanding that love, once found, was to be cherished above all else. When Pastor Mills pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was both an ending and a beginning, the conclusion of their separate journeys and the start of a shared path. The celebration afterward, held at the Lazy S Ranch, lasted well into the evening. There was dancing and laughter, food and drink in abundance. Rose Hawthorne, who had returned from a visit to Denver with a fiancé of her own, congratulated them with genuine warmth. Even Mrs. Hawthorne unbent enough to admire Willa's ring and wedding gifts. As twilight deepened into night, Daniel led his bride away from the festivities, toward the eastern section of the ranch property where their future home would stand. Already, the foundation had been laid, a wedding gift from the ranch hands who had worked in secret during the weeks before the ceremony. "What do you think?" Daniel asked as they stood on what would become their front porch. "Can you see it, our home?" Willa could see it clearly, the house with its welcoming rooms, the garden she would plant, the children they might be blessed with running across green grass, their laughter carried on the mountain breeze. "I see it," she said, leaning against him as he wrapped his arms around her. "It's beautiful. You know, when I first saw you crossing that bridge, something told me my wandering days were over." Daniel kissed her temple. "I didn't believe in second chances until I met you." "Nor I," Willa admitted. "I'd accepted what everyone said, that I was too plain, too ordinary for anyone to notice." "Plain to them," he murmured, turning her to face him. "Precious to me, always." As the stars emerged overhead and the distant sounds of celebration continued, they stood together on the foundation of their future. Two souls who had found in each other not just love, but recognition, the profound understanding that sometimes the heart sees what is invisible to others. In the years that followed, the house on the eastern ridge became known throughout the valley for its warmth and hospitality. Daniel's partnership with Joseph Sullivan flourished, eventually leading to his taking over the Lazy S entirely when the older man retired. Edward Garrick visited once, 2 years after their wedding, to meet his granddaughter, a dark-haired, hazel-eyed girl they named Margaret. And Willa, who had once believed her chance at happiness had died with Thomas Cooper, found herself at the center of a life richer and more fulfilling than she had ever dared imagine. No longer the invisible widow, she became a respected figure in Riverspend, a wife, a mother, a friend whose quiet strength touched many lives. Sometimes, walking through town, she would catch glimpses of her former self in other lonely figures, men and women set apart by circumstance or sorrow. To these, she extended particular kindness, knowing better than most that worth isn't always visible at first glance, and that love, when it finally comes, can transform everything.